Hi everybody, welcome out to the Dice Tower. My name is Chris Yi.
And I'm Wendy Yi.
Today we're taking a look at another pile of games, this time one of our favorite designers. I can barely even talk to you past the pile of games.
Oh my goodness, and this is actually only half of them that we've played of his.
Yes, so Phil Walker Harding,
Wow.
one of our favorite designers, appears often on our top 100 games of all time. A very well-selling designer, very well-received. Makes a lot of family weight, lightweight, fun, just approachable games.
Sure, and so we're just going to go through his games, like some of his original ones, all the way through 2020. So there's a lot more for potentially a later video.
So part one, let's get it started. Back in 2007, the first game that was actually self-published by his company Adventureland Games, Archaeology, the card game. This is a very quick-moving game that's almost in the same kind of line as like Uno type games, where you just draw cards at the start of your turn, and then you can play out sets of them that match, or you can trade with a market in the middle for different market values to try to make those sets.
I remember talking with Phil once, and he said that archaeology is his favorite theme, and so a lot of his games started out as archaeology themes and then ended up switching to something else.
So this isn't the actual box it comes in. The 2007 printing of it was just, like I said, self-published by his company Adventureland Games. Several games from that line we haven't played. This is in the Dice Tower library. This is the little like photo boxes that we put some of these into. Very good game, very simple, very approachable. I mean, it feels like a game that you could play with families. Sometimes a sand disaster card comes up, and everyone has to discard half the cards down and everything. It feels a little bit like an older design, but I still think that it holds up really well. One that I think that you should check out. One that I enjoy a lot for being such a simple card game.
Now, next up on the list from 2013 is Sushi Go. We have the party version, which we'll get to later. But Sushi Go, it was just a deck of cards. You shuffle the deck, you deal some out across 3 rounds, and you're just drafting cards. And I remember playing this and thinking like, wow, this is so simple. It's so streamlined. It's so easy, and yet a lot of fun.
This was the first of his that we played, and I assume that many people, that's also kind of their experience.
It's very welcoming.
It was my coworker Tim who actually came over and said, "Oh, you guys like board games? Hey, I brought Sushi Go." You know.
Oh, I forgot he's the one who introduced us to that.
Yeah, and it was kind of a fun moment where it was a game that someone else introduced to us. We were already healthily into board games at that point. And you go into it with a little bit of like trepidation. You know, I mean, is this going to be like when your uncle recommends you try this game called Redneckopoly? But I'm very glad that he did, because I ended up falling in love with just how simple it is, how easy it is. But of course, we'll have more to say when we get down here. So that was 2013's Sushi Go. 2014. So this here is a smaller, more obscure game called Pack of Heroes. This is one that is from that Adventureland company. It was at his own little publication house back in the day. This is a superhero-themed game where you have a little 3x3 grid, and on your turn you either play a superhero card onto your side of the grid, or you activate a hero, and you're running around, sliding your cards around, punching the opponent. It's a little 2-player head-to-head only game. This one was actually a gift from Phil. We had someone come out to one of our, to Dice Tower West, and I forget your name offhand, but she knows him, and she's like, "Oh, I bet Chris and Wendy don't have this one."
And we sure didn't. And you know what? This does not feel like the typical Phil Walker Harding game to me. Like, this is not, hey, cool, fun engine building kind of thing. Like, no, it's a head-to-head fighting game. I didn't particularly love it.
No, I didn't either. But at what it does, like the type of game that it is filled with many of his hallmarks. Very small. Like small components and stuff. It's not overwhelming. On your turn, you only have a few options, but those options are enticing. And so for this type of game, I think, oh, that's really clever. I don't particularly want to play it again, but but it is cool also that there's like, I don't know, several different factions, 8 different factions you can play in here, all with a different play style. All these nice things I'm saying because Phil is a great, nice guy. But I didn't like
the game. All right, next up is Cacao. Hey, look, we're actually pulling something legit off the box.
2015.
Not legit as in good. I just mean like a larger sized game. It's a fun game. So it's a tile laying game, and what you're doing is you're trying to fill in corners. And as you do so, you're collecting cacao and some other things. I really enjoy that Phil does a lot of games that are very spatially aware. And so this is one of those that as you lay your little tile down, your tiles of workers have different amounts of workers on each side of the squares. And so depending on the amount of workers that you place next to a different tile or whatever space fills in depends on how much you're going to get of that action, how strong that action is. And so there's a little bit of area majority, there's a little bit of resource collection and management and switching stuff out. So there's just a lot of fun stuff going on in this little box. It's spatial.
It's a little tile laying game that feels like a mix between tile laying and worker placement. There's even meeples printed on the tiles that you place out.
It's worker tile placement.
It is worker tile placement because you activate the surrounding tiles either at a level 1 on all sides or 1 here and 3 here or 2 and 2.
Yeah.
I think it's a great, underrated, puzzly game that when you look at any square tile laying game, people say, well, how does it compare to Carcassonne?
And it's very interactive, and I think that's what's interesting about it. Some of his other games are very engine building, but you do a lot of stuff on your own. If you want an interactive Phil Walker Harding game, this one you're very much in each other's way, trying to get the best actions at the best levels.
All right. So next up, well, actually not actually on the pile here, but 2016, Phil Walker Harding and Z-Men Games did a re-release of Archaeology, the card game, but they called it Archaeology, the new expedition. So this is actually the printing that we have here. This cover was a fake out. It was a lie. We're big fat phonies. Anyway, the new expedition is just a reiteration of Archaeology, the card game. But what this one does really well is that it has several different of these tiles here that represent different types of tombs that you could go into. This is something that wasn't in the first printing, and this just creates a little bit more variability from game to game so that the map cards, as you collect sets of those, you can collect cards in different manners that were like at the beginning of the game set aside. And so a great little second edition of an already really solid game. So that's Archaeology, the new expedition.
Sweet. Emotep is next. See, I get to pull the big boxes off because I'm special like that.
And you get to hold them upside down.
Emotep is an Egyptian-themed game. This was actually nominated for the Spiel des Jahres. What you're doing is you're filling up these little boats, and you're each taking turns putting your colored cube in them, and then at some point when a boat is filled enough, someone has the choice of docking the boat, and when they do so, there's little area majority stuff or set collection, those kind of things going on. And you know what? This is one that I really wanted to like, and I remember being introduced to it, and I didn't yet have the ooh, I love Phil Walker Hardingness yet when I played this. But because it was a Spiel nominee, I was excited about it, and it was a little bit more mean than I expected.
This is, I think, by and far his most interactive game, and that for many people is going to be a positive. Clearly
Sure.
for the Spiel jury, for a lot of people, this is one of his most popular games, and it's one that I like the least, actually.
I feel like I'm playing chicken, where I'm putting out these cubes on these boats, and I'm like, I don't want to fill it up too much because you're going to go dock it somewhere where I don't want it docked.
It's really not meant for 2 players, which at that
That's
time, we were
fair.
also primarily playing
We were
just the two of us.
two-player games.
So this was probably a bad fit at that time. But at the same time, even just thinking of it, like very simple rule set, very elegant design, all these great things about it, I didn't really care for. This fits on shelf 4 of the Dice Tower library. That's also probably my rating.
Oh, that bad?
I looked on Board Game Geek. I had rated it a 6 after our play.
Okay.
And I think now, having played several hundred more games since then,
Yeah?
I'm just like, I don't really
See,
feel any compulsion to come back to it.
This would be a 5 or a 6 for me, probably. If someone wanted to play this, I'd play this.
Maybe it's one we'll revisit.
I'd give it a try.
Yeah, maybe that'll be worth revisiting, but not a 2-player. It was too cutthroat and mean.
It was 2-player.
And I don't think we're the only people that thought that because of something else we'll discuss here.
Maybe it was not 2-player. There we go.
Well, 2016 was a great year for Phil Walker Harding as he had Archaeology reprinted, nominated for the Spiel with Emotep, and in 2016 also saw Sushi Go Party. This is the beefed out version of Sushi Go.
You know what's fun about this is I remember when this came out. Like, we're at this point with Phil Walker Harding that I'm like, oh, I remember when that came out. And that's exciting for me because we were, like, solidly in the board game hobby. We were going to our board game cafe, seeing all the new hot games. Like, this is fun. This is where my love really grew. Right here.
Ooh, a beefy version of Sushi Go, or like just like a whole boat, the whole platter here.
It's like the Dominion version of Sushi Go where you can change stuff up.
I thought that's a great
so
touch
cool.
because Sushi Go is such a simple card drafting game, and this retains all of that simplicity, but it gives you some options at the beginning of the game to set it up how you want, and so you can kind of customize, you can tailor it towards your group. This group wants a little more interaction and take that with the spoons. This group does not want that, and they want to have some things that are a little bit more swingy and lucky and group dependent. You have options of how you want your type of Sushi Go game to go.
Yeah, Sushi Go Party, to me, it just took something that was solid and great and made it even more amazing.
Yep. So, yeah, huge fan of this
I'm
one.
surprised there's not more expansions for that, honestly. There's been a couple promo cards here and there, but I'm really surprised that there hasn't been like a Sushi Go Party 2.
As a company, Game Right, I don't think does expand. They're very much family market,
Yeah.
which I think that this game's a perfect fit for. And we've bought some of the promo packs because I want to support the company and I like having more content for the game. The promo cards are cut just a tad bit off compared to the originals. And for me, it doesn't bother me that much because we play it with our daughter, and it's not like I'm sitting there measuring.
The colors are a little bit off too, so like that's the hard thing with print runs, dye batches, and all those kind of things. Yeah, that stuff all changes.
That being said, I don't know if that's just like one batch of the promos that we bought, but I think that they're still worth getting because it's just more variability, more variety for Sushi Go Party.
And those changes are minor because you shuffle everything in. All right, on to 2017. We've got lookout games here. Barenpark. This is such a go-to for me when teaching at conventions. Like, I really love teaching this one. It is polyominoes, which I love and adore. It's planning ahead. You're laying out your polyominoes, and whatever you cover up determines what pieces you'll get for future rounds. And so I love just those choices. You're running after, you're trying to get different objectives of like sets and stuff. And so it's got so much funness in a small, clean, beautiful box that doesn't take that long to play.
It really is just simple, and it's very polyomino forward, right? A lot of polyomino games these days have kind of become polyomino mixed with this type of engine building and whatnot.
Yeah.
And this is one of those that's just a little bit more pure, but I still think stands apart from the other games in that genre. And I just really like that about it.
I think the theme is so unique too because zoo games are very, very common. There's a dime a dozen. There's not a lot of bear zoo games, though. Like, thematically, just a bear park is so interesting.
Right. And, of course, Phil being Australian, he's like, why'd you put koalas in there?
They're not bears.
So they wrote a little note on there that says, they are cute, though, and so we're keeping them in there.
So they're in our Barenpark.
All right. So going over to Simon as a company now, this is Gizmos from 2018.
Oh, I love it.
This is in your top 10. Games of all time, right?
3 of these games are my top 10 of games of all time.
And
Goodness gracious.
many are in my top 100. This is one of the most pure engine building games out there. I really love it, right? It is, for me, in the same genre of games as Splendor, where you can either grab resources on your turn or build some cards functionally. But this does a few things that really separates it. For one, like the production value is cool and everything, right?
I think Simon did a really good job with making it marbles that you're drawing out.
Because we asked Phil about it. He said that originally it was just decks of cards. And the little marble dispenser, gimmicky, sure, but also it functionally reshuffles constantly for you, so you're not worrying about that part of it. Because this game just fires off very quickly, and I really appreciate that about it.
Yeah, I think that it reduced the fiddly nature of it, and it made it really shine and stick out. So I think that's why it's been an evergreen, is because those marbles.
I think so. But one of my favorite parts of it is that when you can either take resources or build, right? And then no matter what actions you do, you can fire off a bunch of your gizmos. You build your engine in a lot of different ways. One of my favorites, though, is the research action, being able to, on your turn, draw cards from the top of a deck. And depending on how beefed up your research is, you can look at a lot of cards. Mm-hmm. And then you can immediately build it or hold on to it for later, which I think makes this game zippier than other games in this genre of grab resources or buy a card.
Because you can dig. You're like, oh, I don't like the lineup. And you're like, well, I'm going to dig a little bit. And I might be able to build one of these things that I'm digging for.
Yeah.
It's fun.
I dig it.
You dig it. Okay, Emotep Dual. Also from 2018. So, like Chris had said before, apparently other people had tried to play Emotep at 2 players. It didn't work as well. So Emodep Dual came out. And the way that the interaction happens is a little bit nicer. So you have a 3x3 grid and you're laying out workers on those. And the boats, instead of filling the boats up with your cubes, instead there are certain like actions or abilities on those boats. And so as soon as there's at least 2 workers on a row or a column, you can choose to trigger that boat, to trigger that function, and to make people take those actions. And so there's some good actions, there's some not so good actions. It just all depends on what you want, what you're going for, and the way they align all depends on how many workers are on those spaces and where you are in relation to the other workers. So it's cool. I liked it better than I liked Emotep.
I absolutely did. Yeah. It's still not one of my favorites, but I think that it does a lot of good. It does a good job of making a lot of nods to the original Emotep without being just a straight up copy of it. It feels like a different enough of a game. The action driver being the actual like inverse, where the boats are already loaded, and now you're kind of prioritizing how you're going to unload them. I like that twist, and I think that that's nicer because, yes, it still has that action where you can say, well, I'm going to trigger a boat unloading for other players, for myself and the other players, but you're always going to get something good out of it. Whereas I feel like in the original Emotep, you could just see your precious boat, full of cargo just go to obviously the worst space. You're like, fare thee well, sailors. I won't even miss you.
Yep, so that's Emodep Dual. Good stuff.
Quite good. All right. Gingerbread House from 2018. This is the second of the Lookout games. The third one we're going to cover in a later video. Gingerbread House is a very unique game, I feel like.
Yeah.
It's almost hard to describe briefly, but on your turn, you are going to play out a cookie domino-esque tile onto this little grid of yours, and you're going to get little resources in return from that. It has like a slight edge of familiarity from Barenpark, where as you lay tiles, you get the stuff you covered up. And you get bonuses based on covering up tiles in a certain way, but it has a very three-dimensional factor to it, which I think is really neat as you're trying to actually build it up. And then based on your resources, you can recruit, or i.e. boil in hot oil various fairy tale creatures in order to eat them. And I love that.
It is funny how it's like, it's so cutesy seeming, and you're literally just trying to lure creatures so that you can consume them and hold them in cages and stuff. So thematically, I think it's very cute. And then, like, mechanically, it does feel like a Phil Walker Harding game, and yet it feels very unique in its own way. You're literally building a house, like you're building a construction. And so I think that it's super cool. I love the resource management. I love the push and the pull of you can only hold on to so many cookies at a time. And so you have to figure out what you're trying to capture based on what cookies you have. And so you're just always trying to figure that out. I love it.
It's all about the cookies. I think what's cool about this, too, is that there are, one of the things that I think that Phil does very well in his designs is there are so many competing objectives. You want to build in a certain way that's most efficient. But then also there's an objective card out there that says if you're the first person to build one of your areas 8 tiles tall, you get like 10 bonus points. You're like, that's really well worth it. Well, if I can make a chimney of my gingerbread house like 12 tiles tall, I get even more points. Well, that's kind of asinine to do, but I'm going to do it.
I'm going to try.
Yeah, I'm going to try. So I love that. I love the competing objectives. This is one that I think that if you haven't checked out, you really should. It's such a great game.
It is. It's way fun. All right, next up is Adventure Games The Dungeon. This is from 2019, also a Cosmos game. And this was a dual project, right? He did this with someone else?
Yes, with Matthew Dunstan as the co-designer.
Where's the names on these? Oh, there we go.
Down there at the bottom.
Nice and tiny. This feels like an old-style video game where you go around and you pick stuff up and you're like, maybe I'll need this later.
Those point-and-click adventures.
I have a crowbar. Hey, look, there's a candy machine. Let me whack it. So there's no candy machines or crowbars in this, but it reminded me of Day of the Tentacle just a little bit. But yeah, you're just going around, you're trying to escape from this dungeon. And this is the first one in a series. We haven't played many of the other ones. We did play the volcano one, which was, we think that it was broken. But this one,
something went wrong.
This was really good. It was so good. We played it with our daughter, and then we handed it off to our daughter's cousins, your brother-in-law, your brother, my brother-in-law. Anyways, doesn't matter. Family members, they loved it. So we've known a lot of people to play this with their kids, have an absolute blast, and you get all of those fun feels of escaping from a dungeon, yay, exploring, pointing, clicking.
Very approachable. One of the things to be said about this, I think, is that it has really good voiceover narration if you do the Cosmos app, or you can just read. They have a book there, so you can just read the adventure yourself. Mm-hmm. But I liked the being able to type the code into the app. We're going to go to space 131. oh, and then the dungeon keeper reads you the story and everything.
Oh, yeah. And you don't get to do everything, and so it's fun because each game is in the same area. It's just kind of expanded a little bit. It grows until you finally escape. I think there's three
scenarios
games in
here.
it. But there's stuff that maybe you didn't do last game that you're like, ooh, but I kind of really wanted to see what was in that room over there.
Yeah, so it's
fun.
It's been long enough that I could honestly replay it. We could replay it with our daughter, and it'd be fun to go through again.
Yeah.
But wary not, there's a whole series of these adventure games that the two of them have done.
They're not all kid-friendly. They're not all, for kids.
Yeah, and this one's not even for kids, but I think it's very kid-friendly.
Very family-weight.
One thing I'll say, just as an aside, is that Matthew Dunstan has been very transparent on his social media. He talked about his income as a board game designer. I'm not going to throw out figures. You can go find it. I think it's like a Twitter thread. And one of the things is that he said that in the years before this series came out, compared to the years after it came out, his actual income from just board game design quintupled or sextupled. It having a series of games like this, he said, is crucial if you're going to be a full-time game designer.
Because it's just consistent income regularly.
Yeah. And so it was about this point that Phil Walker Harding as a designer was able to start kind of looking more towards going full-time, stepping away from his other job. And so the last game we're going to cover is going to be in 2020. The second series of games that we're going to do of his, you can clearly tell he's been doing full-time game design because
we have just as many.
We're covering 2007 through 2020 in this chunk.
Yeah. And
covering just as many games for the last 3 years in the second half.
That's impressive.
All right, well, the next game up here, 2019's Silver and Gold. Hey, have you heard of Roll and Write games?
Oh, that silver is gold. That's how the song goes, right?
It does, yeah. How did you know that? Because we've seen Smash Mouth live.
Because I'm an all-star.
Saw them live at the
cannery. The North Cannery. Oh.
One of the canneries in Vegas, and that's where bands go
when they
die.
Yeah. Anyways, back to Silver and Gold.
Silver and Gold has nothing to do with Smash Mouth. It's a fun Pandasaurus game. It's a roll and write of sorts. It's a flip and write. And I make that distinction because I tend to like that more. You flip over a card that shows a polyomino shape, and then you can cross it out on one of the cards you've collected. When you fill up a card, you can grab a new card. And as simple as that sounds, this game is for some reason just very, very exciting and very enticing. I think it's maybe because there's a few different ways to score. Every card you fill in scores points. Do you go the palm tree strat? You got to do the palm tree strategy. Well, not if there's not a lot of palm trees in the lineup. It might kind of change the way that you want to approach which card you replace with. If there's not a lot of palm trees, I'll leave that one there. Well, the palm trees will then start to accumulate in the middle.
Then I'll go palm trees. Heavy palm trees.
Or do you collect coins and stuff? Very simple.
It is. I like the polyomino element. For me, I'm like, oh yeah, I love polyominoes. I enjoy this. It's fun that there's ways to fill in those tiny little small spaces that get left over as you're filling in. And because, like you said, it's a flip and write, you don't use every card every round, but you definitely narrow it down so you know your odds. You're like, okay, I know the square might come out soon, or I know it's already been out, it's not happening, so I'm going to focus in on trying to make a different shape available.
Yeah, just cards that are worth points, cards that might score points based on other cards. So enough of those competing objectives, I've said before, to make this one stand out from the other slew of roll and write games.
I do have to say Silver and Gold in my mind plays to 7 players, but it only plays to 4.
Correct.
Right, so it's one of those that I don't know why, but I just assume it should play at a bigger table. That's one that might actually be okay with a 5 to 6 player expansion. True. All right, next up, Sushi Roll 2019, also by Game Right, but not in a tin can this time.
It is not.
It is not. So Sushi Roll, instead of drafting cards, you're drafting dice. So you've got your little conveyor belt that you move around from person to person, and it's got dice on it. And so every round you take those dice that happen to be on those conveyor belts and you roll them, and then you draft them. It is not as good as Sushi Go to me, but I still think that it's solid. And if this had been, if this had come out by itself, I think it would have stood out more in my world. But because Sushi Go was just so much cleaner and I enjoyed the set collection a little bit more, I think that's why this one didn't quite make it up there for me, but it's still all the very same cute artwork, tons of fun, good drafting. It is very solid.
I think for me, the biggest hindrance of Sushi Roll is not so much Sushi Go, but Sushi Go Party.
Yeah.
This is a great little dice drafting game. There's small little elements of kind of interaction where you can spend a chopstick token to swap dice that are on your conveyor belt with the die that's in front of someone else. It takes away the simultaneous turn aspect of Sushi Go.
Does.
But it allows for those moments where you're like, you're not getting that die. Here you go. Here's a die that you don't want.
Turn order matters, yeah.
Yeah, and you have to plan accordingly. It's not that you're going to get blindsided by that. You have to plan accordingly, knowing where you are in the food chain of the round. I think, honestly, for me, though, what was like, and this is just a little bit of a marketing disappointment, some of the stuff on the cover of this game here are cards from Sushi Go Party. The dice here represent pretty much just the cards from the original Sushi Go. There's not that much variety. There's enough to make the game interesting and I think really solid. But I was hoping that it would have some of that switch out ability. That's not a real word. That Sushi Go Party does have. And so I found like this one didn't stay in our collection that long, despite how much I liked it, simply because of how much replayability I find in this tin here.
Yeah. Even though I don't like tins.
Yeah.
But I like it without its tin. All right, last one up.
The last one for this session here is Cloud City. This is from Blue Orange Games. This is 2020. I think this is his only release in 2020, actually. This is a game that has a three-dimensional aspect to it. I believe, I'm willing to bet at least, that a bit of the idea of building bridges between different skyscrapers came from working on the expansion for Barenpark, which has the monorail mechanism, which is very similar to this. But in Cloud City, you have 3 different heights of towers that you're building on these tiles that you draft from the middle of the table, and then you can build bridgeways in between 2 buildings if they're in a straight line. But the fact that the brown buildings are tallest, and they're taller than the green buildings, which are taller than the blue, leads to some really awesome city building moments where you can have bridges crossing over other bridges. You have a tall building blocking a short building, and you're like, oh no, I was going to build a bridge over there, but now I built this thing in the way. I hope it was worth it.
It makes a really cool end product. And I think that a couple of his games do that. That at the end of the game, you're like, just look at that. Like, I built that park. I built this Cloud City. I built this thing. And there's something that's very satisfying about that, especially if you're someone who takes pictures of every game that you play, which someone does over here. We have more pictures of games than our child. By far.
We own more games than children, okay?
Uh-huh. But it just, I like that, being able
wrong.
to finish off a game and being able to be like, ooh, this is really pretty. And for me, that's the selling point on this, less than the actual gameplay. I liked it, but it didn't stick for me. It wasn't a solid landing. It was like I did my somersault, I did my whatever vault, and I like stepped at the end, you know? I didn't like stick it perfectly. Because I felt like the scoring was okay, but it wasn't as interesting as I wanted it to be. But I still liked it, and there's something really cool about connecting those cities.
I think I like this one more
buildings.
than you.
I think you did.
The drafting tiles from the middle is very, very simple, but I think what it then leads to is really good decisions of how you're going to prioritize building. Like I said, the buildings at different heights and stuff. What really makes the game work for me, there's 2 things. If you play a 2-player, play with the larger play area, the 3x4 grid. I think that's huge. And then the other thing is I think you should always play with the objectives. And I'm sure that most people, if you've played this, have pulled those out. If you haven't, oh my gosh, you're missing out on about half the game. Because racing towards doing those objectives is huge. And are you going to actually be able to pull them off while also doing the basic scoring that you're talking about? 8 length.
Getting long bridges out.
Or 8-point bridges are worth far more than the 3-point ones. So you want to prioritize getting those. But with those scoring objectives, like I said, competing goals of what you're going for, this game shines. And of course, as you said, it's very photogenic. And pulling this out and teaching it at a convention again recently. I hadn't played the game in maybe...
Oh, did you pull it out?
Yeah, I pulled it out just this last year. I hadn't played it in like over a year. And it was easy to get the rules back out and just, I don't know, just for me, it sticks the landing. For that group of people I taught it to, stuck the landing because they were like, this is amazing. Got to look into this one. So yeah, I think Cloud City's great.
It might be worth trying again for me. Did you have people walk by and go, ooh, what is that?
Yeah.
Because this is one of those games.
I like when a game does that.
Oh, yeah.
So there you go. That's the first half of our pile of Phil Walker Harding games. It wouldn't fit in shot. And we also didn't want to take 3 hours, so we kind of chopped it down here.
We did what we could. That's
Yeah.
for sure.
But yeah, a designer that we really enjoy. We got to meet him at this last Gen Con, and he's a charming fella, just as charming as his game designs you would expect. So someone that we like a lot. Stay tuned here. In the future, we'll be doing basically his 2021, 22, and 23 designs.
Modern Phil.
And the stack will be just as tall.
Oh, yeah. He definitely was busy. Busy stuff. All right, thanks so much for joining us today. I'm Wendy Yi.
I'm Chris Yi.
And have fun playing Phil Walker Harding games.
Cuddle some koalas.
Aww.